Hey, Pusnet, new video. On this one, what I'm going to do is, first of all, as you can see, it's my new setup, so I would like to have comments, see how you like that. And this one is the first series on a big topic that I'm trying to do, infectious disease and natural disasters. This one will be the first principles and general approach. And the reason I'm kind of doing this one first to trial, see how my system works, and the second thing is to kind of give a little bit of background of what the other videos are going to come. So first of all, let's start with some definitions. So there's different levels for infectious disease, and with these levels as well comes different response. And so one that it is, and I'll show. And again, infectious disease are not. It's not my forte. It's not my strength and stuff. So I've been watching a lot of courses and doing a lot of readings and stuff and research for this presentation. So hopefully be good. And if anybody else has a little bit more knowledge, please feel free to comment. So the first one will be endemic, and this one is kind of a normal reservoir, and it's at the individual level. And so the regular flu season is kind of the regular one, and so we're expecting it every year and stuff. When it's a little bit more than the usual, then it comes to a different level, but usually we're always expecting people to have the flu. And so at that point, it's a healthcare professional helping an individual, and we get them a little bit better on that. So the next level is the epidemic or the outbreak. And it seems like people kind of use this word into both words. But at that level, it become more community. So Ebola was kind of at that level, close to the pandemic one, because we had a few cases outside, but it was more cases that we brought back here. So on the epidemic, and the community side is basically that's what it is that it's a community. We send a lot of resource over there, try to control it and everything. So at that point, that's where you're starting to see kind of government getting involved with it, as well as down. I'll put another link on a course I did, which was very good, explaining kind of where government, especially for the people in the States, where the different government, the different layers of government effects for that at the epidemic versus the pandemics and stuff. So it's very interesting. So individual to a community. So at this point, we're more a bigger group. It's a community and everything. And then when we talk about pandemic, it went from a community to global. So basically, all around the world now, it's kind of everybody is a little bit sick and stuff. And so the H1N1 was a pandemic. And at that point, again, now it's different countries were closing airports and flights and stuff. So it becomes at that point, it becomes like a pandemic. And why are we talking about all this? Well, the response that we have, like we said, it depends on the different stuff. But I wanted to start with some definitions so that further, when we start talking about pandemics and stuff like that, we have a common ground. But the whole purpose of this is not to turn you into doctors. And I find a lot of times when I see other people on YouTube, it's almost like that's the approach, is that they give you this impression that come and do my course or read my book or buy my kit and you'll be able to do everything. And I think it's very ambitious, if not a little bit unrealistic, because even if I give you all the training, and we'll see that in people coming out of place like paramedic school, medic school, or nurses, or doctors and stuff, even when they get out of the school with all the knowledge and everything, they're missing one link, and it's the art. Because it's medicine's not just a science, it's an art. And so when I read those things and stuff, what I'm trying to do is get a little bit stuff so that you can do the best decision in situations like this. When disaster happens, we don't have much resource and stuff, and you're pushed to do a decision. It is not for you to make a decision when we have full-blown the hospital is working and stuff, and you can treat yourself at home and everything. Obviously, it does help, just like having a first aid course. And you don't need to call 911 every time that you cut yourself, because now you know a little bit how to do your approach. It's the same thing about this, because situations like this, it's not taught in the further. So what I want to do here is not so much to train you as doctors or nurses or anything like this, a healthcare professional, but it's to help you to take better decisions. Because also, in why I focus on disaster versus outside approach, is that as well as that, if when a lot of people talk about scenario, the world has ended and we're living and stuff, if that would ever happen in any case, communities would get formed, and there's a high chance that anybody with formal medical training would be found in that community. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, anybody that could take that role with much ease than you forced to do anything. So basically, past 2 months, to have to supply for your own self, because during a pandemic you have to shut down yourself in your apartment and everything. That's pretty much the limit of the training, and you should kind of focus. And again, it's not to diagnose people, because that takes years and like I said, art and everything, but it's to do best decision in situations like this. And so the reason that I kind of show those decisions is that, so that way that when we're facing with case like this, so if you see, like, can you make the difference between those two diseases, which are two different, totally different disease that has two different organisms affected and everything. And one thing that a lot of time in infectious disease we do not have when we're outside in situations like this is that we don't have the laboratory, the labs and the cultures that we have in the hospitals. And this is where I find that maybe antibiotics is not the holy grail that a lot of people problem because of this, because we don't know what sits on those skins. A lot of studies that I've read is multi-organism. A lot of them are virus and some protozoa and all those other diseases that we'll talk a little bit later and stuff. And so antibiotics will work on those things. So we cannot combat something that we don't quite know what it is very easily with antibiotics. So that way, I'll see the principles that I talk a little bit later, but I think antibiotics is not the big way to go. We'll talk a little bit about that. As well as one thing that you need to be informed with is know the disease that are permanent in you. One concept and I want to really focus on is what we call the reservoir. And a reservoir means that there's a disease that exists. So for example, is typhoid. Well, let's take one, malaria. Doesn't exist up a certain level. You cannot find malaria in Canada because we don't have the mosquitoes to develop malaria. So until we have those mosquitoes over here, I cannot have malaria unless I come from another country and I got it at that country, because that's where the reservoir is. And it will come very important in disease like tuberculosis and stuff, where in some place they have a higher reservoir than other places. So we'll find another link at the bottom here of the video with a map of all the higher disease, emergent disease that we call and stuff, like especially the zoonosis disease, which is basically disease coming from animals, which is very important to kind of keep control and keep in mind what's going on, so that you have a better approach when it comes to infectious disease. And so that's why, like I was talking about, what's the usefulness of antibiotics? Well, if you can identify what kind of organism that you're going to be facing, it's going to be very hard to as well give a good treatment, because you need to have the right antibiotics for the treatment, and it won't work for stuff like if you have the flu or if you have a virus, it won't work. So the big holy grail, like everybody, let's book up on antibiotics and stuff, I don't think it's a very sensitive approach because of that, because it's pretty limited. Because if your antibiotics, like for example pneumonia, can be caused by a virus, it can be caused by a lot of other stuff, as well as like saline water that you have, and those antibiotics won't work because it's a different type of pneumonia that's not really treated. It's a pneumonia, but it's not a pneumonia that could be treated by the regular antibiotic that we have. And again, with all disaster, they can have that reservoir. It's a very important concept, because what it means is that some of the disease that we're not used to see will be transferred to the population, because again, either animals will be changed, or human being will be changed, or I will be contact with sewer water, which I would not be used to be in contact usually, and so the disease that I would get from those would be more prominent. So it would be coming a little bit more endemic or an outbreak versus other disease that we would see. And a lot of the guidelines that we have right now is based on the society as it is right now, which would break down in any disaster, and you would see an emergence of other disease because of that reservoir. So it's important to keep track of that. So the major injuries for a disaster is basically trauma, wound care, very important, that I've seen. Respiratory infection, that's when they're not in orders of importance, but basically those would be the 4 ones that I would focus my kits and stuff on. Respiratory infections, mostly because we're in close proximity and close apartment with not good ventilation, so opening windows and stuff would be good, and we'll talk a little bit more when I do a specialize on prevention. And diarrheal disease, and this is one important, and WHO has a World Health Organization has a few recommendations, which you can see here right now. Basically, keep cleaning your hands, keeping your food, preparing your food properly and stuff, keeping your toilet separately and stuff. And so that is where I'm talking about prevention. If you have a good prevention, and prevention is also important prior to the disaster. So anybody that has chronic disease like diabetes, renal failure, or things like that, or immune compromise, it's very important to start looking at your prep as building up not just on tools and stuff like that, but be even more present on your immune system, boosting up. What can I have? Have quality food. Invest in a lot of quality food, because anything malnutrition and stuff will increase your risk of having infection, especially in a place where you'll have like lack of sleep and things like that. So people with those diseases, it's very important to have a big plan on quality food and malnutrition and boosting the immune system. Anyway, that was my little talk. Hopefully you like that new format, and leave your comments on there. Again, this is the first part of a little series, and a kind of a test run as well, to see how you like the new setup and everything. And talk to you soon.